The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by guest chaplain, Pastor J. Heinrich Arnold of Bruderhof Church Communities in Riften, New York.
Good morning. Let's pray. Lord our God, we lift up thanks and praise to you this day for the beauty of this earth, your creation, for people of all lands and cultures, for our country and nation, its founding values defending human dignity, liberty, and justice for all. We pray for all the members of this House of Representatives and for all who walk and work these storied chambers, hallways, and offices of our government, all servants of the people and servants of you, our God. Grant them wisdom, patience, understanding, determination, and hearts of love and self-sacrifice in order to make good law, uphold the Constitution, and legislate for the flourishing, unity, and strength of our people and country, to lead all nations in efforts of peace, justice, goodwill, and generosity and love to neighbors and even enemies. Forgive us our faults and heal our fractured world. This we pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Gottheimer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Ryan, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to welcome and thank today's guest chaplain, Pastor Heinrich Arnold, representing the Bruderhof community in New York's 18th District. Over a century ago, the founders of the Bruderhof were exiled from Germany for their refusal to fight for the Nazis. They eventually found refuge and freedom here in America. Today, the Hudson Valley is proud to be the home to almost half of the worldwide community of Bruderhof members. They have continued their practice to lead a much simpler life, focused on family, faith, and selfless service. And their example has served and inspired our entire community. Pastor Arnold's leadership extends far beyond his role as senior pastor for the Bruderhof communities. He also serves as chaplain for our Ulster County Sheriff's Department, a teacher at the Woodcrest Elementary School. He has dedicated his life's work to speaking about forgiveness and reconciliation through the Breaking the Cycle of Violence program. His efforts in over a dozen countries and right in our own community have been remarkable to follow. At a time where our country faces such great division, I'm thankful for Pastor Arnold and the entire Bruderhof community for presenting this prayer today, blessing our government as we prepare to make critical decisions in the days to come. I ask all of us to recenter ourselves and work together on these critical issues laid out before us. And as the Bruderhof believe, when you truly love your neighbor as yourself, peace and justice become a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair will entertain up to 5 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to recognize Jack Miller, an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and champion of civic education. He founded the Jack Miller Center, a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to reinvigorating education in America's founding principles and history, an education vital to thoughtful and engaged citizenship. He recognized that the future leaders of our nation lack a fundamental understanding of the founding principles of our republic, as well as our history. Madam Speaker, we can agree that Mr. Miller's endeavor is of paramount importance, and it underscores a serious demand that we prepare future generations of Americans to become both informed and engaged citizens. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for your continued work in ensuring that America's bedrock principles remain alive and revered. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to recognize a profound loss in the Japanese American community, the passing of Sakae Aratani. Her death coincides with an ever-dwindling number of adult Japanese Americans who endured the injustice of being forcibly removed from their homes and imprisoned in World War II internment camps here in the United States. She and her late husband, George Aratani, made a remarkable, successful post-war journey in business and became important philanthropic figures within the Japanese American community and beyond. Every year, I would see her at community gatherings for various Japanese American organizations that she and her husband supported. And every year, I was struck by her grace, elegance, and intelligence. My heart goes out to the Aratani family, and I join with the rest of the Japanese American community in mourning her passing, and I yield back, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, evangelists with Mountain Gateway Ministries have worked across the country doing disaster recovery, providing food, clothing, and planting churches with the support of the assistance of the Nicaraguan government. Americans and their Nicaraguan counterparts associated with Mountain Gateway have made it their mission to spread the hope of the gospel to the Nicaraguan people for nearly 30 years. In January, the Attorney General of Nicaraguan government began pursuing charges against 3 U.S. citizens associated with Mountain Gateway and 11 of the Gateway Nicaraguan pastors on trumped-up charges of money laundering and organized crime. Since then, 11 pastors have been charged with up to 15 years in prison and a combined $1 billion in fines. These pastors were working to bless the people of Nicaragua, and now all their personal property has been seized. They have no legal representation, which is a violation of their human rights. These sentences leave families without income, children without mothers and fathers, simply for sharing the good news of Jesus. I am deeply concerned these citizens and pastors are being targeted for sharing their faith. I ask the Nicaraguan government to release the imprisoned pastors immediately. Matthew 5:10 says, "Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." I am praying for a swift resolution of the persecution of these pastors, and they be safely returned. I'll yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House floor for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Bobby Allen. Bobby was one of Jersey's best, a hero who put others first as a firefighter and an advocate for his brothers and sisters of labor. He recently passed away after a valiant fight with cancer. Bobby started his career with the Patterson Fire Department in 1992. He was among the brave first responders on September 11th. In recent years, he became a labor leader, serving as president of FMBA Local 2 and chairman of NJFMBA's legislative committee for more than a decade. Bobby will live on through his beloved relationship and big personality, and those who loved him in the firefighter community, his family, of course, and all of his friends. And the legislation he championed, which improved the lives of thousands of career firefighters and retirees. Because of his advocacy for the Fire Act, firefighters nationwide are safer and better equipped to protect our communities. As we mourn the loss of Bobby Allen, we think of his wife, Marianne, his parents, retired Patterson Battalion Chief Edward Allen and Peggy, and his many other friends and family other members. Madam Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in remembering Bobby Allen.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, today 14 U.S. textile manufacturing plants stand idle, and much of the rest of American manufacturing is endangered by a new threat from China that this Congress could end at a stroke. In just the last 2 years, roughly, Chinese online marketplaces have exploded in size. selling cheap goods at dumping prices into the American market. What's causing this? Well, they learned to exploit fully the de minimis tariff loophole. In 2023, nearly 1 billion packages entered the U.S. through the $800 de minimis loophole, nearly 4 million individual shipments per day. That's not de minimis business, it's big money. Chinese companies Temu and Shein alone account for roughly 1/3 of all de minimis shipments. Temu appeared on the American scene only in 2022, Shein not much earlier. You can go buy sneakers on Temu for $5, a sweater for $7. Temu reportedly loses $30 per order in a deliberate strategy to flood the U.S. market with cheap crap and move toward market dominance. It's not only textiles.
Your time has expired.
We should close this loophole today. Yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Together, we are witness to war in the Middle East. Yet so many of us are divided in our righteous anger and desire for peace. At home, I speak with friends and family and constituents who want what is just. Nevertheless, I also see how we speak past each other, missing the common humanity of both Israelis and Palestinians, the innocent people on both sides who work, live, play on lands now ravaged and scarred by war. So let me be clear, I condemn Hamas, and yet I decry Mr. Netanyahu's prosecution of this war. That is why I called for a bilateral ceasefire and a release of all remaining hostages in February. I hold both beliefs, not as an equivalence or political spin, but as a principle to stand with the innocent, with Palestinians and Israelis who must know peace and security in their lifetime. We must reject the far too tempting politics of hate and division and embrace the duty of peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians. In time warped by hate, I lean on my faith,
Your time
on the
has
wisdom
expired.
of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise to recognize World War II veteran Elmer Koch of Danville, Virginia, who recently turned 100 years old. After finishing high school, Elmer joined the U.S. Maritime Service Radio School. He underwent his training in New York and Massachusetts, learned Morse code, and was promoted to warrant officer. In 1945, he joined the William J. Palmer, a Liberty ship carrying the products of the arsenal of democracy to American forces and allies around the world. When sailing across the Mediterranean in 1945, the William J. Palmer struck a mine in the Adriatic Sea. Elmer jumped into action, helping make way for a lifeboat to detach from the sinking ship. The entire crew boarded a rescue ship and were taken to Italy with no crew members lost. Elmer headed back to New York and again to another Liberty ship, going to France to transport hundreds of victorious American soldiers back home. Elmer was discharged in 1946 and returned to his wife Hilda and their Gretna farm. I'm honored to recognize the extraordinary veterans of Virginia's 5th District like Elmer Koch, a living picture of the courage and patriotism that have kept our nation free. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Hawaii seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On August 8th, 2023, there were many heroes that exhibited courage and bravery as wildfires ravaged Maui and Hawaii Island. Today, it is my honor to recognize one of those heroes, Captain Riley Kuhn, a third-generation mariner and co-owner of one of Maui's oldest family boating companies, Trilogy Excursions. When the Coast Guard called for help, Riley and 6 other Trilogy captain and crew members answered the call, rescuing countless people who had jumped into the ocean to escape the flames and transporting them to safety. Battling 80-mile-per-hour winds, intense heat, and smoke, Riley saved lives as they conducted emergency rescues throughout the night and into the next morning. For his courageous efforts, the Congressional Medal of Honor Society selected Riley from over 200 nominees nationwide as the 2024 Single Act of Heroism honoree. It's an award that's much deserved, and it serves as a reminder of the many everyday people who stepped forward and became heroes on those faithful days. So today, in addition to recognizing Riley, let us lift up and celebrate all of our heroes who risked life and limb and ran towards the flames to save the people and places they love. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
The chair lays in front of the House an enrolled bill.
Senate 382, an act to take certain land to the state of Washington into trust for the benefit of the Puyallup tribe of the Puyallup Reservation and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Kane, seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1149, I call up House Resolution 1143 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 1143, resolution condemning Iran's unprecedented drone and missile attack on Israel.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1149, the resolution is considered read. The resolution shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs or their respective designees. The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Kane, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Kane.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous materials on this measure.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, over the weekend, the world watched in horror as Iran launched over 350 drones and missiles at our ally and friend, Israel. This attack confirmed our worst fears. The likely attack was openly discussed in the media for days before it occurred. For years, Iran had been threatening Israel and amassing a terrifying arsenal of missiles and drones. No one should have had any doubt that one day Iran would fulfill its long-standing threat of death to Israel. However, the fact that this unprecedented escalatory attack was long expected does not make it any less terrifying. Were it not for close coordination between Israel, the United States, and other partners to successfully intercept these weapons, Israel and other countries in the region could have faced significant casualties and major damage. Over the last 7 months, we've seen Iran's poisonous influence rip apart the Middle East. Iran-backed Hamas launched the massive, unprovoked October 7th attack on Israel. They killed over 1,200 people. Hezbollah has fired thousands of rockets, mortars, and missiles into Israel. Iran-backed militias have launched over 170 attacks on American troops in the Middle East, and the Iran-backed Houthis have launched over 100 missiles and drones attacks on global shipping. This is not just a threat to Israel. This is a threat to the United States and to all of our partners in the Middle East. And that is why this moment is of such tremendous strategic importance. Iran and its proxies are testing the resolve of Israel, the United States, and the international community. We absolutely must restore deterrence against Iran to protect our vital national security interests in the Middle East. And that means standing shoulder to shoulder with our friend and ally, Israel. We are stronger together. Together, this coalition literally shot missiles and drones out of the sky, protecting cities and citizens alike. Like some of my colleagues over the Easter recess, my wife Rhonda and I traveled to Israel, and we were able to see firsthand the impacts of the conflict on the people there. The resolve of the Israeli people is stronger than ever. H-Res 1143 makes a simple, clear statement that we stand with Israel and we support Israel's right to defend itself and to restore deterrence, including by responding to this attack as is appropriate. And it also makes clear that our long-standing commitment to Israel's security, including through arms sales and security assistance, is ironclad. Finally, it urges full enforcement of all of our sanctions against Iran and its proxies. Madam Speaker, we must not forget what Israel experienced over the weekend is, unfortunately, a reality of everyday life in Ukraine. Our adversaries are working closer together than ever before in undermining the American-led international order that has kept peace in the world since the Second World War. Before the United States ultimately joined the war, Winston Churchill showed the world the fortitude it took to look into the face of authoritarianism. He declared the democracies of the world stand up for their beliefs and they would endure. We must project that same message today and in the future. Our allies and our partners are watching what actions this body takes. We must project that Churchillian confidence. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of the gentleman from New Jersey's resolution 1143, condemning Iran's unprecedented drone and missile attack on Israel. Like every member of this body, I'm horrified by Iran's direct attack on Israel. In retaliation for Israel's targeted strike against 2 Iranian military generals in Damascus on April 1st, Iran launched more than 300 drones and powerful missiles at Israel's population, Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. The great success of Israel's missile shield, co-developed by the United States of America and the combined forces of the U.S. military, France, the UK, and Jordan, prevented significant death and destruction. And our thoughts and hearts are with the young Israeli Bedouin girl who is recovering today from injuries she suffered during and due to the Iranian projectile. And I stand strongly with the people of Israel and their defense against both direct and proxy Iranian attacks, and support this resolution being offered by Representative King. Israel, of course, has the right to defend itself like any other country. But as a true friend of Israel, I do encourage the Israeli government to be smart and strategic as it considers its response. And I urge this body not to beat the drums of war. As Secretary Blinken recently said, an escalation of the conflict is not in the United States or Israel's interests. And I understand, believe me, I really understand the rage felt by Israel towards the government of Iran, a government hell-bent on wiping Israel off the map. The 2 generals whom Israel eliminated worked day and night to provide Iranian proxies the lethal materials and strategy necessary to significantly harm the state of Israel. And I also understand the need for Israel to maintain strategic deterrence. Iran needs to know there will be serious consequences if it attempts to harm Israel. Deterrence serves to prevent expansion of conflict. But I also understand the massive consequences of Israel and Iran descending into a broader war and what that would mean for the United States and the rest of the entire world. An expanded Israel-Iran war would distract from the ongoing conflict in Gaza, a conflict that must end while assuring the elimination of Hamas's military capabilities. We still have the challenges that we must get and must free the hostages remaining in Gaza and achieve a humanitarian ceasefire. Famine and the current humanitarian catastrophe must be reversed at all costs. And there must be a realistic plan for the future governance and reconstruction of Gaza, one that results in Palestinian control of the Strip. An expanded Israel-Iran war could also serve to drag the United States of America deeper into the conflict. As the ongoing debate on the supplemental should make clear, the United States already has a lot on its plate. My colleagues, Please remember that Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine remains unfinished business, and that Ukraine is losing ground to Russian forces due to Donald Trump's interference in our emergency supplemental process. The future of Europe is urgently at stake. Already there are dangerous conflicts simmering throughout the Middle East region, including continued attacks by the Houthis in Yemen against international shipping and U.S. military forces. China still has its sights set on Taiwan as it strengthens its relationship with both Iran and Russia. And an expanded war in the Middle East would put American soldiers deployed in the region in greater danger. It would harm the American middle class and global economy still clawing back pandemic-spurred inflation, just as our economy is beginning to rebound. And there are those amongst us, I'm asking those amongst us who think it is wide to open a broader war in the Middle East this week. Do we want to further encourage Iran to rush and build and test a nuclear weapon? Do we want to give Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping the satisfaction of the United States being bogged down in war? China and Russia would love to see the United States embroiled and distracted in the Middle East as they continue their nefarious destabilizing objectives in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. We should not let that happen. I will conclude my remarks where I started. We stand strongly with the state of Israel and its right to defend its people. Israel, without question, has the right to defend itself. And I hope that strategy and thoughtfulness rule the day. Not rage, not revenge. There's too much at stake, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you. I stand in strong support of this resolution condemning Iran's unprecedented missile and drone attack on Israel. However, it is important to note that for the people of Israel, attacks and threats from Iran are far from unprecedented. Every single day, the people of Israel face attacks from Iran's terrorist proxies that literally surround the state of Israel. Hezbollah, the Houthis, and of course Hamas. And we saw the consequences of Iran's massive support for these terrorist proxies play out in such horrifying fashion on October 7th. Now, with this latest unprecedented attack directly from Iran, we saw almost all of the missiles and drones intercepted. And this is a testament to the strength and the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship, both in terms of the partnership that has allowed Israel to develop such an impressive capacity to defend itself, and in terms of the collaboration that was on display. And I am glad that we will soon have an opportunity to provide long overdue support for Israel in this time of such great importance for the region. Something else, though, is equally important to note about what happened last weekend. And that is that you had regional allies, other countries in the region, also rally to Israel's defense. This is something the likes of which we have not seen before. And it speaks to the extraordinary success of the Abraham Accords to usher in a new era of peace in the region. This, of course, is exactly what Iran does not want. This is the reason for their desperation, is they understand what is unfolding. If they do not respond, if they do not somehow stand in the way of it. So this is a time not only for the United States to stand with our ally Israel, but for every nation around the world that values peace, freedom, and democracy to do so as well. I strongly support this resolution. I would hope it passes this House with strong, unanimous bipartisan support, and I yield the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves.
Yes.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As people are here witnessing and speaking about the attacks are all interconnected. Iran, Russia, and China all are seeking to do harm to to our nation and to the Western rules-based order. It's extraordinarily important in these times that we show strength and unity of purpose. And I am thankful that the gentleman from New York, the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Meeks, supported this measure both in the Rules Committee as well as on the floor here tonight, because it shows a very strong importance of this resolution and our unparalleled support for the State of Israel and the right to defend itself. We, as the House of Representatives, have the responsibility, and I expect later this week, we'll pass a strong foreign aid package that will support support our opposition to Iran, will support our opposition to Russia, support our opposition to China, and make sure that we support the people who are fighting for the freedom in Israel, in Ukraine, and in Israel, to make sure that we have the strong support of the American people. And that is why it's important on a bipartisan basis that we work together to support this measure. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves.
I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman.
In closing, Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in sending a strong, bipartisan, and overwhelming show of support for the State of Israel in the passage of this resolution. Our allies and partners are closely watching this body's actions. We must send a clear message that we stand by our allies and our partners and are resolved against the adversaries and those who wish us all harm. I urge the adoption of this resolution, and I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Chair, I yield the balance of my time to Representative Madeline Dean and ask unanimous consent that she may control that time.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania will control the time.
Thank you.
She's recognized. Woman is recognized.
I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey. Is recognized.
Yes. Madam Speaker, again, I urge my colleagues to join me in sending a strong, bipartisan measure and overwhelming show of support for the State of Israel in the passage of this resolution. Our allies and our partners are closely watching this body's actions, and we must send a clear message that we stand by our allies and our partners and are resolved against our adversaries and those who wish to do all of us harm. I urge the adoption of this resolution, and I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Louisiana, the Majority Leader, Mr. Scalise. He's a strong supporter of the State of Israel. He has led this floor time and again in to support one of our strongest allies in the world. And I yield Mrs. Scalise as 1 minute.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my friend from New Jersey for leading this effort and for
making sure all of our colleagues have the opportunity to stand with our friend Israel while they're at war. And we all know, starting October 7th, Israel was attacked barbarically by one of Iran's proxies, Hamas, a terrorist organization. They went into Israel, murdered barbarically. Israelis took hostages. Still to this day have about 130 hostages, including some American citizens. And while this war to eviscerate the terrorist organization known as Hamas is going on, Israel then over the weekend faced an unprecedented attack directly from Iran. So no longer is it the proxies, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, all who are supported by Iran. Now Iran directly attacked with 300 plus drones, missiles, to try to kill more Israelis. And so, fortunately, a coalition, of course, Israel, but the United States and other allies joined together to shoot down those missiles and drones. But at the same time, Iran made it clear they wanted to attack Israel directly, which means Israel now is looking at how they properly respond. And during this time, again, a war that started, this idea of a ceasefire, the ceasefire ended when Hamas decided that they were going to go murder Israelis. Israel has a right to self-defense. We have always stood, this Congress, by our friend Israel, our greatest ally in the Middle East, a democracy in the Middle East. But they are always under attack. They've been under attack since their existence. And they know how to defend themselves. But when they respond, whatever choice the people of Israel make through their elected leaders, we need to express our support for that defense. That's Israel's right. If America's attacked, we saw September 11th, there have been other attacks on our homeland, of course, Pearl Harbor. America responds. And we don't have our allies calling us saying, don't respond. This is a time when the allies of Israel, including the United States, need to support Israel in their right to respond. Call out Iran, as this resolution does, and Mr. Kane's been really good about laying out the case for why we need to condemn Iran and their actions, but we also need to support Israel as they consider their options and how to properly respond to deter this from happening again. It was unwarranted. It shouldn't have happened. We shouldn't just look and say, well, all the missiles and drones were shot down, so, everybody should just look the other way. They will keep trying until they kill innocent civilians. Iran has always sponsored terrorism, and they've gotten away with it. We need to put sanctions back on Iran. They shouldn't be able to sell their oil on world markets, for example. Iran has made up about $60 billion in the last 3 years selling their oil on world markets. They shouldn't have that access. They use that money to sponsor terrorism. And now they're using that money directly to attack our friend and our ally, Israel. And while Israel's under attack, now more than ever, we need to be unequivocal in our support for our friend Israel in the right to self-defense. So God bless the people of Israel. We stand with them. This resolution makes it very clear. And I thank again my friend from New Jersey for bringing this important piece of legislation and urge its adoption. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves.
Yes.
The gentleman from New Jersey.
I'm ready to close and yield back my time, if you want to.
Thank you.
He did. The gentleman reserve. The lady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand by Israel and its right to defend itself and condemn in the strongest of terms Iran's direct attack on our ally. And it is my hope that Israel listen to what many of its allies are saying and not take steps that lead us into a greater regional war. As President Biden has said, our defense against Iranian threats to Israel is ironclad. We have Israel's back, and we will not yield to Iranian threats.
I support this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I urge the adoption of this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1149, the previous question is ordered on the resolution and the preamble. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed.
Madam Speaker, on that, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House is in recess subject to the call of the Chair.
The House will come to order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on adoption of House Resolution 1143, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 1143, resolution condemning Iran's unprecedented drone and missile attack on Israel.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 404. The nays are 14. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House will be in order. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute, and I would like to remind our members to please take your conversations off the floor. Please do so now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Y'all hold it down, please. Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor Lance Corporal Gary Kuntz. Gary enlisted in the Marines on October 26, 1967, and attended basic training at Parris Island, South Carolina. After basic training, Gary was shipped to Vietnam, where he drove a truck that carried supplies. After a short time, he was then transferred and was a door gunner with the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing. His unit played a crucial role in Operation Dewey Canyon, and their legacy remains tied to the challenges and triumphs of the Vietnam War. During his service, he was awarded the National Defense Service Medal, Mr. Speaker, the Vietnamese Campaign Medal and Device, Vietnamese Service Medal with Device, Combat Air Crew Insignia, Good Conduct Medal, and the Air Medal Award and Strike Flight Port. When Corporal Kuntz returned home, he was transferred to the Marine Reserve to complete his obligation. Once returning to Knoxville, he became a realtor, super successful, and developer, and he's an active member of the Vietnam Veterans of America. He recently worked with the VA and local assisted living facility to help a veteran get transferred closer to his wife. He is always calling me about veterans and the problems they're having, and he's trying to work to resolve them. It's my honor to recognize Corporal Kuntz as the Tennessee 2nd District April 2024 Veteran of the Month, and he is an incredibly good friend, and dadgum, he's just a great American. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does a gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
To revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute. Order, please. Members, please take your conversations off the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to represent a large and vibrant Armenian community in my congressional district. On behalf of those constituents, I rise today to recognize the 109th commemoration of the Armenian Genocide. From 1915 to 1916, the Ottoman Empire systematically massacred the Armenian people. According to the U.S. Holocaust Museum, up to as many as 1.2 million Armenians were killed. This genocide is one of the most painful moments in the world's history, and yet sadly, it is not spoken about much. We can never deny or forget the systemic and individual killing and mistreatment of Armenians. We must learn from the terrible history and never lose focus on protecting oppressed and vulnerable people. We owe that to the victims and their descendants who are still reeling and suffering from this cruel and unjust atrocity. I urge my colleagues to join me in standing with the Armenian community. We should all make time to reflect on this solemn day of remembrance.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Ginger High Colvin, who was recently announced as the 2024 Women's Basketball Coaches Association NAIA National Coach of the Year. Ginger has been the women's basketball coach at Campbellsville University for 17 years. Ginger has deep ties to Kentucky's 1st Congressional District, growing up in Monroe County and being a basketball star at both Tompkinsville High School and Campbellsville University herself. Ginger's receiving this award for the 2nd year in a row is a testament to her commitment and dedication to her players and the university. Under Ginger's leadership, the Lady Tigers have a 477-98 record, a 31-2 record this season, making it to the NAIA Elite Eight. Congratulations to my friend, Coach Ginger Colvin, on this well-deserved award and another successful season. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise my comments.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today during National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week as the first 911 dispatcher in Congress. During America's darkest moments, 911 dispatchers are the first responders from talking people out of committing suicide to handling active shooter situations. Every single day, 911 dispatchers talk to people during their most difficult time in their life. Despite their hard work, 911 dispatchers are classified as clerical workers, making them first on the chopping block for budget cuts, leading to staffing shortages for an already stressful job. For this reason, I urge Congress to pass my 911 Saves Act and honor 911 dispatchers with a well-deserved reclassification, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the 100th birthday of Charles Colville, a lifelong resident of Cranberry Township in Venango County. Charles was born on March 24th, 1924, and he is the oldest of 4 children. He left high school in 10th grade when he was offered a job driving a truck, and a year later, he started working on the railroad. A few years later, in May of 1943, he was drafted into the United States Army at 19 years of age, where he served until 1946. Charles spent 3 years overseas in the Pacific Theater and was even part of the division sent to clean up Hiroshima after the atomic bomb was dropped. Following his discharge in 1946, he was awarded the Combat Infantry Badge, World War II Victory Medal, Good Conduct Medal, Philippine Liberation Ribbon with 1 Bronze Service Star, and the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 2 Bronze Service Stars. After the war, Charles returned to Cranberry Township working as a pumper on an oil lease. Today, Charles has many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and he continues to share stories of his time in the Army and growing up in Venango County. Happy birthday, Charles, and thank you for your service to our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
My remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to call for a renewed investment in the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is set to expire this month. The ACP has helped over 23 million households who have received affordable broadband internet. In my district alone, that's 1 of 4 people who depend on the ACP for internet access. This access is so important. It allows people to work from home, children to do their homework, people to get health care online, and everyone to participate in our digital economy, all without prohibitive costs. This investment is about more than just internet access. It's about opportunity and equality and strengthening our economy. Continuing to fund the ACP would have bipartisan and overwhelming support when brought to the floor. Millions will be left without internet access if we don't. And so I urge the Speaker to bring this bill to the floor, urge my colleagues to sign the discharge petition, which will be here today. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the outstanding career of Joe Brannon. After Joe graduated from the University of Georgia, he spent 8 years serving on the staff of Georgia Senator Sam Nunn. He went on to have a successful banking career spanning over 40 years. Joe will retire as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Georgia Bankers Association on July 15th, his 44th anniversary of joining the association. The Georgia Bankers Association enjoyed its greatest decades of growth and prosperity under the unwavering leadership of Joe. Joe has served on a wide variety of boards, both in and out of the banking community, including the Georgia Bar Foundation, Georgia Chamber of Commerce, American Free Market Chamber of Commerce, the state YMCA, and his own local church. Joe is a trusted advisor, a thoughtful leader, and a respected friend to many. In short, Joe is one of the good guys. I wish him and his wife, Vilda, nothing but happiness and a well-earned retirement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Oregon seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize my constituent, Claire Lanfear, who was just awarded the Congressional Gold Medal for her service as a real-life Rosie the Riveter during World War II. I had the honor of meeting Clarice and her granddaughter in my office last week and hearing firsthand her story of courage and conviction during a very dark time in our nation's history. Clarice gave birth to her daughter just hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor. But like many Americans, she felt the need to spring into action and support the war effort. So Clarice went on to work at the Kaiser Shipyard in Portland, where she cut and welded steel for ships. And she wasn't the only one. In total, about 16 million women across the country served as riveters, buckers, welders, and electricians during the war. These real-life Rosies were critical to ensuring American victory. Today, Clarice is 102 years young, remains very active in her community, and is eager to share her story with younger generations. I can't think of anyone more deserving of our nation's highest civilian honor, and I'm so grateful to Clarice and her family for their service. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the memory of a true hero, Nate Bruckenthal, who gave his life in service to our great country on April 24th, 2004. Born in Stony Brook, Nate's unwavering dedication to service was evident from a young age. In 1999, he answered the call of duty and joined the United States Coast Guard and served on the Point Wells, based out of Montauk. In 2004, he deployed to the Arabian Gulf, where he and 2 Navy sailors were killed while intercepting a waterborne suicide attack off of the coast of Iraq. Nate's actions saved the lives of countless fellow sailors, and we can never thank him enough for his bravery and heroism. Nate's ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty serves as a poignant reminder of the selfless and courage exhibited by our service members every day. May we never forget his sacrifice, and may his memory inspire future generations to serve with the same bravery and devotion. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP, a lifeline for 23 million households nationwide, is on the brink of collapse. April marks the end of the program, putting the internet out of reach for many Americans. The ACP is about leveling the digital playing field, especially for rural America. Without action, millions will lose access to high-speed internet. In North Carolina's 1st Congressional District, over 81,000 households rely on ACP for internet access. ACP isn't about luxury. It's essential for our farmers, students, and small businesses. I urge Congress to act now. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Sir, without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in honor of Father Robert Cyril Guise, who passed away and entered into eternal life on April 4th, 2024, at the age of 92. He demonstrated through his decades of highly respected godly service around the world that a timeless faith in our Savior Jesus Christ rises above all earthly troubles, and that a man who dedicates himself to bringing the Word of God can shine a light to those in darkness that can never be extinguished. He brought countless souls to Christ and should be commended for this, but I believe that he would have preferred to be remembered as a simple servant of God. In his humility, he gave us an example to follow, this being a reflection of the example of our Savior. Father Cyril was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Harry and Mary named McGrath Guise. Father Cyril was a Carmelite friar for almost 65 years. He entered religious life on August 21st, 1950, at the age of 19, and made his first profession of vows a year later, and was ordained to the priesthood on June 6, 1959. After his ordination, Father Cyril was called to minister in the Philippines, and then he was appointed vicar at the church's retreat in Petersboro, New Hampshire. For the next several decades, Father Cyril lovingly served those in the most trying of times as a dedicated hospital chaplain in multiple locations around the country. In 1994, God called him to Holy Hill, where he served in leadership for a 3-year term as prior and the director of the developmental office. He will be greatly missed by his religious community. And on a personal note, Father Cyril was my Uncle Bob and Auntie Mary Jean's priest. And we all consider him a member of our family who offered the greatest comfort to those of us during their passing, as he did during the passing of our daughter. May God bless him and grant him sweet repose. Mr. Speaker, I ask that Father Robert Cyril Guise's contribution to my state and to the nation and to the world be entered into the congressional record for posterity. And with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to speak about the need for congressional support for energy stability in offshore, isolated, underserved areas. In the Virgin Islands, we are acutely aware of the impacts of climate change, including the increasing frequency and severity of hurricanes, as evidenced in 2017 with 2 Category 5 hurricanes hitting our home. Energy remains the single most critical factor for our territory's future. High electricity costs and power instability continue to hamper economic recovery. Systemic energy instability has direct and indirect negative impacts on sustainable economic development, which magnifies existing societal vulnerabilities. The Biden-Harris administration's energy policy offers the Virgin Islands and places like it a transformative opportunity, including the Energy Department State Energy Program, Loan Program Office, the Interior Department's Energizing Insular Communities, and EPA's Solar for All programs. We must continue to utilize and champion this administration's vision to enable disadvantaged, isolated areas to define and implement our energy future through a modern-day lens, fundamentally addressing our needs as we see them. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I rise today to ask permission to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in a time where there's conflict and war throughout the world, it's also good to remember those things that bring a smile to our face, whether it's those people, those traditions, or those places. And today's tribute is one of those in my life. It's the 100th anniversary of Frank's Restaurant, which is an absolute icon in my hometown of Zeeland, Michigan. It was started by a man named Frank Dionese over 100 years ago, or just 100 years ago, and was family owned. The Dioneses and the Hammers had owned this until just recently. It's the kind of place that every Zealander has memories in and around. It's the kind of place where every true Zealander knows what their go-to order is. Mine happens to be the olive burger with onion rings. And I just want to say thank you to Teresa Vanderswag and the families that have taken that under and made sure that this institution is continuing while it celebrates 100 years in the great town of Zeeland, Michigan. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the strongest town in America. This year, 16 cities from across our continent competed for the title of North America's strongest town over a 4-week span, with each round of voting lasting 1 week. These communities competed for a prestigious title. That title came back home to America's heartland in the Great Lakes region. The winner was Maumee in Northwest Ohio in the 9th Congressional District. It took the title over Norfolk, Nebraska. This year's contest was the 9th annual event to name the strongest town, and according to contest rules, a strong town is defined as any town, big or small, that prioritizes making progress in transportation, housing, and fiscal resiliency for the long-term benefit of its people. The award does not ask a town to be perfect, nor does every strong town look the same. This is because strong towns incrementally adapt to the conditions and challenges of their specific place from the bottom up. Maumee, Ohio, that exists along the Maumee River, the largest river that flows into the entire Great Lakes, will hold a news conference this morning to formally accept this prestigious title. We in Northwest Ohio couldn't be prouder of Maumee, Ohio. Onward, Maumee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Seeking ask consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, we have this gigantic problem with our sieve of a border. We hear all these ideas of how we can spend lots of money or that the White House can't do anything about it. Well, I remind you that President Trump had many pieces in place that were actually working and bringing the numbers down on illegal immigration into this country. And all we have to do is put these pieces right back in place. President Biden, by executive action, could put these 8 ideas right back in place and not have to do anything with new expenditures or new legislation. We have the laws, we have the ability. It just needs to act. So to hear the president saying like, well, I don't know if I have the authority, that's bogus. He has the authority. If he wants to take action, he can. These 8 items right here on this poster could be something he could sign executive orders right away and stop a massive percentage of what's wrong with our border and make our country secure again, save money, save the wear and tear on our social programs, and make our citizens of this country feel like their citizenship actually means something once again. I urge President Biden to actually take these steps and put us back on the correct track. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to emphasize the need for the Biden administration to authorize work permits for those in our nation who are long-term immigrants. Yesterday, my colleagues and I sent a letter to the White House pushing for work permits for long-term immigrants, those that have been in our country for decades, working hard, paying taxes, contributing to our economy. We should also help the spouses of our military. We should also help deported veterans. The last time we had meaningful immigration reform in this country, that great Californian Ronald Reagan was president. To date, Congress has failed to deliver on a pathway to citizenship. So, Mr. Biden, I ask, use your pen, sign an executive order, give these hardworking immigrants a work permit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the gentleman for 1 minute, and then House Group Ayes is extended for 1.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate Georgia's Jeff McClendon on the conclusion of his tenure as chairman of the National Association of Wholesaler Distributors. This association is comprised of the companies that keep America moving while employing 6 million Americans, many of them Georgians, in high-paying, rewarding careers. With Jeff's guidance as chairman, NAW expanded its educational opportunities for emerging leaders, enhanced its thoughtful leadership in a rapidly innovating world, and continued to be an effective voice for distribution-friendly policies here in Washington. NAW's success under Jeff's leadership shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Knowing Jeff's success in the business over these past 20 years, leading Duluth, Georgia's specialty building products. I had the opportunity to visit one of his facilities last year and to meet with him and members of his impressive team. Jeff is a humble leader and a man of faith who cares deeply about his employees, his community, and his country. I again congratulate Jeff on his tenure as NAW chairman, and I appreciate his continued servant leadership in the Georgia business community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, later today on April 18th, 3 Australian submariners are slated to graduate from the Groton Submarine-Based Submarine Training School. They are the first 3 submariners from Australia under the AUKUS agreement, security agreement, who are gaining proficiency to operate a nuclear-powered submarine. Again, a first for both countries. After graduating from this course, they will be headed to Naval Base Pearl Harbor for assignment to United States Virginia-class submarines, and this again marks another first, where they will be the first ever Australian naval personnel assigned to a U.S. Navy vessel. Over the next 12 months, 100 Royal Australian Navy personnel will continue in this pipeline to implement the AUKUS agreement, which is one of the smartest collaborations between the U.S., the U.K., and Australia to uplift their submarine capacity to work together for the 3 nations and rebalance the deteriorating security environment in the Indo-Pacific. Congratulations to all, or as they would say in Australian, good on ya. Yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And still I rise, Mr. Speaker, and still I rise. And today, I'd like to do something just a bit different. I've stood here on many occasions and said that I love my country, that I salute the flag. I still love my country and salute the flag. And today what I'd like to do is actually salute the flag. I just believe that any time is a good time, especially when you are in this facility, to salute the flag. So if you would indulge me, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move to another podium. And still I rise, Mr. Speaker, proud to stand here in the well of the House of Representatives. One can but only imagine the great speeches, the oratory that has emanated from this area. But today I want to do something different. I just want to say the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance from this very almost sacred place. So those who would like to join me, you but only have to stand, and as you would normally salute the flag, you may do so. If you choose not to, you don't have to. The greatness of America will not be measured by whether the Al Greens of the world salute the flag. The greatness of America will be measured by whether the Al Greens of the world would defend those who choose not to salute the flag, who choose not to say the Pledge of Allegiance, who choose not to sing the national anthem, who choose not to stand for the anthem. So I today will do what I will do, and that is salute the flag. And those who choose not to, I see there's a great discussion going on in the back. Mr. Speaker, could we ask persons to take their conversations off the floor, especially at this time?
House will be in order. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. To all of my friends who are here, all of my friends who are here, we are about to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and for those who choose not to, you don't have to. But those who do, would you join me by standing? I place my hand over my heart when I say the Pledge of Allegiance. I shall lead in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you for joining me in this Pledge of Allegiance. I wanted to do this because I believe the values that we have in this country, we can export to the rest of the world. I believe that the words in the Declaration of Independence, a founding document, these are words that we can export to the rest of the world. All persons created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are powerful words. These words are words that we are in this country still trying to make real. It's a great and noble ideal, but we still have not gotten there yet. We are forming still our more perfect union. But I think that as we do it here, I believe that these things can be exported to the rest of the country, the rest of the world, if you will. The notion that all persons are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want to focus for just a moment on life. Life, this aspect of the pledge, the Declaration of Independence. Life. And I want to focus on lives not just in this country because we do this quite often. So I've said a lot about the deaths that are taking place here, the mass shootings that are taking place here. Yes, but I want to export this idea to another place. I want to talk about this noble concept as it relates to Gaza and what's happening to the lives in Gaza. I want to do this because for too long, the thousands that have lost their lives have been statisticized. The statisticization of their lives is a disservice to humanity. Their lives should not be, these innocent people, innocent men, women, and especially children, their lives should not be just simply statisticized. Their lives ought to be humanized. And today I'd like to humanize the lives, and I also have a resolution commemorating innocent civilian lives lost in Gaza, especially children. Let's export the great and noble American ideal in our Declaration of Independence. Let's apply it to people on a global basis. So now I shall move back to the podium where I ordinarily make my comments, because I have some paraphernalia there that I'll be introducing. Mr. Speaker, I move to the next podium. This is a resolution that I am previewing. There may be some tweaking, but I'm previewing it, and it will be filed either today or tomorrow. This resolution, commemorating innocent civilian lives lost in Gaza, especially children. Whereas this resolution may be cited as the original resolution commemorating innocent civilian lives lost in Gaza, especially children. Whereas on October 7, 2023, Hamas conducted a heinous attack on Israel, leading to Israel declaring war on Hamas, not Palestine, not Palestinians, but declaring war on Hamas. And I say this because, unfortunately, a good many people, too many if you will, have concluded that the war is against Palestinians, against Palestine. The war was declared against Hamas. And the Prime Minister of Israel himself has indicated that the war is against Hamas. He's also indicated that the Palestinians are victims. The Palestinians are victims. I concur. The innocent Palestinian men, women, and especially children are victims of this war. They are victims to the extent that they not only suffer from being in a war zone, but they also suffer by being harmed in various and sundry ways. I'll say more about this later. And they are losing their lives. Continuing. Whereas both Palestinians and Israelis are in mourning, the country of Israel is still in mourning from the October 7th horrendous attack. Gazans, Palestinians, innocent men, women, and children are in mourning because of the thousands, the tens of thousands who have lost their lives in this war. Whereas in 2020, the population of Gaza was over 2 million, with approximately half being children under the age of 18. Whereas the pain, suffering, and deaths of innocent Palestinian men, women, and especially children are too often reduced to statisticalization. Whereas people of goodwill must do more than statisticize the pain, suffering, and killing of innocent civilian Palestinians. Whereas people of goodwill must do more to humanize the pain, suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, with explanations of how they lost their arms, legs, eyes, ears, and lives. Let me repeat this, because this statisticization is something that is difficult to say, but also something that we ought not attribute to persons who have lost their arms, legs, eyes and hearing, as well as their lives. This is a very sad circumstance to have to negotiate and deal with. Whereas because of the war, homes, schools, businesses, hospitals, and more importantly, their lives in Gaza have been destroyed. Whereas because of the war, many businesses have been decimated. Whereas hundreds of thousands of innocent civilian men, women, and especially children in Gaza have suffered through the loss of mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters while starving and suffering the mental anguish associated with war. Whereas civilians in Gaza live in constant fear of sudden loss of arms, legs, and life. And whereas tens of thousands of innocent civilians, including thousands of children, have been brutally killed in a war beyond their control. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives commemorates the tens of thousands of innocent civilian lives lost in Gaza, especially those of children. The lives lost should be viewed as more than mere statistics. The humanity, the pain, suffering, and deaths of the tens of thousands of men, women, and especially children must be commemorated and memorialized. The killing of innocent men, women, and especially children in Palestine must cease immediately with all possible haste. All hostages must be returned immediately. And we're talking about hostages that are Israeli as well as any that may be Palestinian, but we know that Israeli hostages were taken. And finally, because the United States largesse has contributed to the purchase of munitions used by the Netanyahu administration, the United States must do everything it can to address the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, perpetrated by the destruction of homes, infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and also, I would add, the loss of human life. So now what I'd like to do is give you some graphic indications of what this is all about. There's an article from the New Yorker that I'd like to read, dated March 21st, 2020. I'll go through it, and then I'll show you some pictures of what has happened. But first, let's start with this representation. This is a representation of persons who are in mourning, and they doing what people do when they are suffering. You can see persons who are screaming and crying out, and the language reads, of the thousands of Palestinians killed in Gaza, about 70% have been women and children. That's quite a large number, 70% about women and children. This representation is of persons who are making an appeal for food. You can see in their eyes a sadness. You can see with their hands extended a plea for food. A plea for food. The language reads, the catastrophic levels of hunger and starvation in Gaza are the highest ever recorded on the IPC scale, both in terms of number of people and percentage of the population. Highest percentage, highest ever recorded. Hunger in Gaza. But now, this picture is a representation that tears at your heart as well, but perhaps even in a more profound way. Because this young lady that you see, this baby, she is without her left leg. And she's on a playground, so one would conclude that she's not in Gaza. You would be correct. But you would be incorrect if you assumed that this injury occurred in some place other than Gaza, because that's where it occurred. And as I will read this article from the New Yorker that I alluded to earlier, you will get a better comprehension of where she is and what happened to her. It's a very sad story. But we have to humanize these thousands of people. We can't just allow them to become numbers. If they're just numbers, it's easy to dismiss them as casualties of war. But they are more than numbers. These are human beings who have suffered. These are human beings who have relatives that are suffering. These are human beings whose lives are never going to be the same. And there's a good likelihood that they won't have what we have in this country, and that is the medical assistance to help them recover, those who survive, as well as the medical attention for their mental illness that they may suffer. These are human beings. Some mother cried because of what happened to this child. Some father is crying because of what's happened to his child in Gaza. We cannot allow them to be dehumanized and reduced to statistics. We have to humanize these persons. I have chosen this baby as the example for us to give some thought to. This article in the New Yorker is styled, "The Children Who Lost Limbs in Gaza." Subtitle reads, "More than 1,000 children who were injured in the war are now amputees." Some things bear repeating. I say this quite regularly. Reads, "More than 1,000 children who were injured in the war are now amputees." This baby is one of more than 1,000. What do their futures hold? This was on March the 21st, 2024, when published. It continues, and these are excerpts. Ghazal, pictured in parentheses. This is the baby. This is the photograph that accompanied this article. Ghazal, pictured, was wounded on November 10th when, as her family fled Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital, shrapnel pierced her left calf. That would be the leg that she lost. Pierced her left calf. To stop the bleeding, this is what will break your heart. To stop the bleeding, a doctor who had no access to antiseptic or anesthesia, antiseptic or anesthesia, heated the blade of a kitchen knife. No antiseptic, no anesthesia, heated the blade of a kitchen knife and cauterized the wound. Now, cauterization means that he took that hot blade without any anesthesia, without any antiseptic, and he placed this hot blade on the skin of this baby. A hot blade to save her life. But can you imagine the screams? Can you imagine the heartache that the parents felt as they see this happening to their baby? But they know that it's necessary. This is a life-saving technique. A hot blade, heated blade of a kitchen knife, and cauterized the wound. Now, she is more than a statistic. She's a human being, and she deserves to have someone recognize her humanity. Within days, the gash ran with pus and began to smell. Suffered the hot blade, and now the gash is smelling, running with pus. By mid-December, when Gazelle's family arrived at Nasser Medical Center, which has been rendered dysfunctional now, I believe. If it's not, it has been brought back online, but it was. But Gazelle's family took her to this medical center. It was at the time the largest functioning healthcare facility. But when they got there, gangrene had set in. Hot blade, first she's wounded, then she suffers a hot blade. Now she has gangrene, necessitating amputation at the hip. We're talking about the baby in this picture. Let's humanize her. On December 17th, a projectile hit the children's ward of Nasser, meaning this hospital. Gazelle and her mother watched as it entered the room. Here's the mother with her daughter, suffering, having suffered cauterization with the blade of a hot kitchen knife, now in the hospital, and they witness the projectile coming into the ward where the baby is. A projectile hit the ward. Gazelle and her mother watched it enter the room, decapitating Gazelle's 12-year-old roommate and causing the ceiling to collapse. This is the baby that has suffered more than any human being should. And now, while in the hospital, a projectile comes into the ward where she is. And this projectile decapitates the 12-year-old roommate. We have to humanize. We've got to humanize, not statisticize. This caused the ceiling to collapse. Multiple reports describe the event as an Israeli attack. The IDF claimed that the incident could have been caused by Hamas, a Hamas mortar, or the remnant of an Israeli flare. Now, this is what the New Yorker says, quoting someone with the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, and this person is indicating that it could have been a mortar from Hamas, or it could have been an Israeli flare, the remnant of an Israeli flare. Ghazal and her mother managed to crawl out of the rubble. The next day, their names were added to a list of evacuees who could cross the border into Egypt and then fly to Qatar for medical treatment. This is her now in Qatar. Her mother got her out. Her mother was 9 months pregnant. The mother whose daughter has suffered incalculable pain was 9 months pregnant. And she gave birth to a baby girl while awaiting the airlift. All of this time, this mother, having her daughter suffer the blade of a hot knife to save her life, then taking her daughter to a hospital where a projectile enters the room and decapitates another baby, 12 years old, in that room. Now she sees all of this. This baby is a witness to this. Can you imagine what her life will be like, the trauma she will suffer? We have to humanize these lives. This is not just another casualty of war. It's a human being. UNICEF estimates that 1,000 children in Gaza have become amputees. So this baby represents 1 of 1,000. Probably more than that now. This baby has to be humanized. This article indicates, and it's in quotations, this is the biggest cohort of pediatric amputees in history. This is happening in Gaza. The biggest cohort of pediatric amputees in history. And we call these casualties of war. This baby is just another casualty of war. The biggest cohort in history. She's more than a casualty of war. It's a human being. Let's move to another story that should be humanized. This one is from CNN, fairly reputable news source. The style of this article is, at least 13 killed, including 7 children, after strike on Gaza's Al-Maghazi refugee camp. 13 killed, including 7 children. Now, this didn't happen a month ago. This didn't happen 2 months ago. This happened on April 16th. April 16th. That's in the very recent past. At least 13 people, it reads, were killed, including 7 children, and more than 25 injured after a strike targeted Al-Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza. And this was on Tuesday, according to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital officials. The graphic video that was obtained exclusively by CNN from eyewitness Nihad Adatala shows several casualties scattered on the floor, including children, with blood streaming around the area. This was Tuesday. This is Tuesday. This is the Tuesday after what happened, sometime after what happened in Israel as it relates to Iran. So this happens in Gaza. As the Netanyahu administration is planning a response to what happened with Iran. How do you think these people feel? What about them? Are we now going to just forget them? We'll just go on to the next fight. And these thousands, tens of thousands, over 30,000, we just sort of put them in the past. I will not. There has to be some justice for these children. This is what's happening to them is an injustice. You cannot, in the name of justice, create an injustice and call it justice. An injustice in the name of justice is still an injustice. This is an injustice. And it's continuing. And it's continuing after Prime Minister Netanyahu has indicated that he wants justice for what happened to Israel. How can we just let this become a thing of the past? I refuse to allow it to be a thing of the past. So the video shows several casualties scattered on the floor, including children with blood streaming around the area. Dozens of people appear to be running around in panic, screaming, and trying to count and carry the dead bodies. A foosball table covered in dust is seen among the dead bodies. The witness who lives in the camp told CNN he heard an explosion around 3:40 p.m. local time on Tuesday, around 30 to 40 meters away from him. This is his quotation. "I immediately walked to see what happened and found dead bodies thrown on the ground, people screaming, kids dead on the ground. They were just playing foosball and they were mortared," he said. Footage shot for CNN from inside Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital shows a continuous flow of casualties and injured people being ushered in as the emergency room is crowded with patients, including several wounded children crying out on the floor. Children. Remember now, let's go back to the style of this article. At least 13 killed, including 7 children, after strike on Gaza's Al-Mahazi refugee camp. The emergency room is crowded with patients, including several wounded children, crying out on the floor. Family members are seen crowding over their loved ones' dead bodies, kissing them, holding on to them, and sobbing. These are human beings. They do what human beings do when they suffer these kinds of tragedies. Video from inside a morgue at the hospital shows families trying to identify their loved ones among the deceased. Fatma Issa points to a white body bag with a young boy's bloodied face exposed, telling CNN, "This is my son." A young boy's bloodied face exposed in a white body bag. "This is my son," she says. Another man cries out, "They have nothing to do with anyone. They're civilians. Have mercy on us. Have mercy on us." These people are pleading, appealing to us. And I say us because our fingerprints are all over this. The munitions being used are in some part related to the largesse that we send to the Netanyahu administration. That largesse is the link to us, and we have to do something about it. Have mercy on us. You are killing children. You are not killing an army or fighters. Remember earlier I said the war was declared on Hamas, not Palestinians, not Palestine. Here's a validation of the thinking of the people in Gaza. These people understand what's going on. You are killing children. You are not killing an army or fighters. You are killing children who were peacefully playing in the street. Children playing in the street. One moment there are children running and doing the things that children do, laughing, and the next moment, 7 are dead. You're killing children who were peacefully playing in the street, not an army, not fighters. Video shows him handing a young girl's dead body to another man, both men crying out Quranic verses and sobbing. The man who receives her body is seen placing her on the ground and covers her body with a jacket, telling CNN, "This is my daughter." Human beings dying and suffering and then dying, and those left behind suffering. This war has to cease. It's got to stop. We ought to be among the first to say it's got to stop. Do you think history is going to be kind to us? Posterity is not going to be kind to the Netanyahu administration. We will be seen as persons who were eyewitnesses by way of television to a great human tragedy and did not do what we could to prevent it. Remember, the war was not declared on children. It wasn't declared on women. It wasn't declared on innocent people. It was declared on Hamas. But we know that more than 30,000 Palestinians have lost their lives, and some of them in horrific ways. There seems to be a means by which the mind can process a person dying as a result of an explosion from one of the bombs that we helped pay for. There seems to be a means by which the mind can process that and see that as something that is not as horrific as if you do it in many other ways. It was just a bomb. Person was just a casualty of war. Just another number, that's all. We need to move on. And my fear is just that at some point, Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Prime Minister Netanyahu, will decide enough is enough, And we will then say, he has now moved on. But do you think this baby will have moved on? You think her parents will have moved on? You think the people who are suffering now will have moved on? This is a rest of their lives incident. Incident. What a kind way to say it. This is a rest of their lives tragedy. This is a rest of their lives slaughtering of human beings. You think they can just move on? At some point on this infinite continuum that we call time, we're all going to have to account for our time. Somebody's going to have to account for this and the thousands of innocent people who've lost their lives. And it won't be simply, well, I just cast a vote. I didn't do it. There's a connection. We have our fingerprints all over this. And we ought to do what we can to prevent it from continuing. The man who has said this is his daughter, he indicates, this is my oldest daughter. Her name is Luan. She is 9 years old. This man has lost his 9-year-old daughter, and it goes on to indicate the strike hit them while they were playing out in the street. They are all just children. Friends, I can't let it go. I'm sorry. I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. These are babies. I can't let it go. I refuse to be a participant in this any longer. I've done it too long already. Too many babies have been killed. It's got to stop. Don't expect me to continue to fund this. Say what you want about me, but I'm not going to continue to fund this. Killing of babies and then making them mere numbers. At some point, we have to come to our senses. Don't you see what we're doing to ourselves and our image in the world? Don't you see what Mr. Netanyahu, the prime minister, is doing to Israel's image in the world? Israel had the moral high ground. It's losing it. Some would say it's lost it. But we are quick to return it if something happens in Israel. We're quick to return it. You now have it again. I refuse to continue to fund this kind of atrocious behavior. You know, Voltaire was right. Those who can make you believe absurdities, actually it was those who can cause you to let's just say believe absurdities. There's another way he put it, but those who can cause you to believe absurdities can cause you to commit atrocities. That's not the exact quote. We now believe the absurd notion that it's all right to kill innocent men, women, and especially children if in that process we're trying to get to a dastard who is hiding behind these innocent men, women, and children. I refuse. I refuse to continue to be part of this unbelievable killing of men, women, and children before our very eyes that we are funding. Now, someone would say, well, the war in Ukraine, you're funding that. We might remember that Ukraine is defending itself in a war where there has been an invasion. I don't want war anywhere. Ukraine's innocent men, women, and children are being killed as well. But Russia is funding that. Russia, that's their fingerprints all over that. And I don't approve of what Russia's doing. That's easy for us to say in this country. It's easy for us to condemn Russia for what Russia's doing. We do it without hesitation, without equivocation. We do it. No consternation. Just Russia, we can do it. Why? Because it's easy to look through the window of life at someone else and say what you're doing is wrong. It's not so easy to look into the mirror of life and see the wrong that you're doing yourself. At some point, we have to confess to what we're seeing in the mirror of life. If we don't, we will still be judged. I assure you, history is not going to be kind to us for what's happening in Gaza. And there will be people who are going to wonder, what was wrong with them? They saw it. They had evidence of it. And they still forged forward. Get it over with. Finish it, they say. Finish it. Finish this. Get this over with. You think it'll ever be over for her? I refuse to continue to support this. Now there will be some who say, if you can't do this, you ought not be there because we expect you to cast the votes to do this. Well, friends, all I can say to that is my conscience will dictate that I do what I do. I will do what I must, and let others do what they may. Do what you will. I've not suggested to one of you that you have to vote a certain way. I'm just telling you how I'm going to vote. And I am telling you that history is not going to be kind to all of us. That includes me. I voted for over $50 billion to go to the country of Israel. Not that very long ago, we voted more than $3 billion. I've been a supporter. I am still a supporter of the people. I am not a supporter of the Netanyahu administration. I support the people, not that administration. Because what they're doing to the people of Gaza is ungodly. It is shameful. It is disgraceful. And I will not support that. So let others do what they may. And if there are people who believe so strongly about this in the 9th Congressional District that they want somebody who will tolerate this and go along with this, send them on up here and take me out. Because I don't go along with it. I'm not going to go along so that I can get along. Not when it comes to this. And by the way, I'm no saint. I don't claim to be a saint. I just claim to be a person whose conscience dictates that you not support this kind of behavior. So, Mr. Speaker, I will close with this. Notwithstanding all that I've said, I still love my country. I am an American. I believe I'm of African ancestry. I've not checked my bloodline to find out. I don't know. But I love this country. It means something to me to say to people that I'm an American. I love it more than it's loved me. It segregated me. The rights that the Constitution recognized for me, my friends and neighbors in the South took them away from me. But I still love my country. How can you love your country when your country has treated you the way it has, Al Green? The back of the bus, balcony of the movie, step off the sidewalk when people come by, separate line for you at the grocery store, colored water fountains. How can you love it? Because I love what it stands for in its noble ideals. The ideals of liberty and justice for all, as extolled in the Pledge of Allegiance that we said at the genesis of this message. The ideal in the Declaration of Independence, all persons being created equal and endowed by their Creator with these inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is why I have said, because I love these ideals, I believe we should export them to other people, but not export them in the sense that we want them to simply obey them and treat other people right. I think that's a good thing to do. But in the sense that we ought to respect her life, her liberty, and her desire to pursue happiness. We ought to respect her life, export that to people across the globe, especially people that are trapped in Gaza, can't get out, no place to go, told to move from one place to another. Let's give them the benefit of these noble words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I will do so in every way that I can, and I believe in this country and love it to the extent that I believe we ought to make that noble ideal real for people in this country and without this country, especially the people who are in Gaza. Mr. Speaker, as a proud member of this Congress and a proud American in the sense that I love my country because of its great ideals, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you. We want to look at three major issues, and sometimes with the minor day-to-day issues, one forgets to analyze the major issues that I think are going to determine the fate of our country. In the last week, one more time, we got the results on the number of people crossing the southern border. And while the results keep pouring in month after month, it is, in my opinion, and I think most people's opinion, the most significant issue that Congress has to address. In March of 2024, and these are, of course, all our estimates, we believe 220,000 people crossed the southern border and stayed in the United States. This has something in common with every other month this year, and it goes up and down depending upon the time of year. One more time, we hit an all-time record of the number of people coming into this country by that month. In March of 2024, 220,000. In March of 2023, 130,000. In March of 2022, 166,000. In the final year of the prior administration, 11,000. So one more time, we see the increase from 11,000 people coming here in a month to 220,000 people coming here in a month. We recently had a hearing on the border in a subcommittee related to the Oversight Committee. And on that committee, the Sheriff Wayburn, pointed out that right now, about 25% of the prison population, the Venezuela prison population had dropped by 25%. This is consistent with concerns raised by the Border Patrol that in addition to just plain taking people we can't afford to take, other countries are dumping their undesirables into this country. Does President Biden care that the number of people in Venezuelan prisons have dropped by 20%? That should by itself be a banner headline. The next thing to look at, in addition to that drop, is an anecdote from Sheriff Wayburn from Virginia. He points out that someone asked a member of the cartels, do they care about the fentanyl coming in this country and all the people that are dying? And his quote was, they were okay as long as the fentanyl was killing Americans. Now think about that. This is consistent with what we think the worst possible motive for bringing fentanyl in this country is. They want to destroy the United States. China itself is playing a role in the amount of fentanyl coming in this country. You know, the young people of this country may feel they're not involved in a war. They never enlisted in the Army, they never enlisted in the Navy. But like it or not, you are in a war. As a matter of fact, more people are dying in the war that you have signed up for than any of the wars that our armed services fought in. About 108,000 people a year. They are dying in a war because the Mexican drug cartels and foreign countries that produce the fentanyl do not wish the U.S. well. They apparently like to see young Americans die. And young Americans have to realize that there are people gunning for them. When we talk about that 110,000 people, that's about twice the number of people every year who die in the war on drugs compared to the number of people who died in Vietnam. Think about that. I'm old enough to remember Vietnam. People were dying all the time, headlines on people dying in Vietnam. Twice as many people die every year as died in 12 years in Vietnam. Just unbelievable. Now, there's some people who get confused and think, well, we just have to take these people coming here illegally because we are otherwise cruel in not allowing enough people in the country. Here's something else that we ought to be talking about a little bit more. The number of people who come into this country who are sworn in as legal citizens goes up and down from year to year. Last year, but if we take it in 4 years, well, first of all, last year we had a total of last year available, 969,000 new people were sworn in as immigrants in the United States. If you break it down in 4-year increments and things go up and down, at least back to the year 1910, there has never been a 4-year period in which so many people from other countries were sworn in the United States. There is no reason to feel guilty if we turn these people around. because right now a record number of coming here. In that 4-year increment, you're a little bit over 80,000 people, or 800,000, I'm sorry, 800,000 people, 800,000 people every year being sworn in. It's kind of interesting. If you go back and look, say, the 1960s, which I remember well, you were in a normal year around 110 to 120,000. So we've gone up in the 60s to swearing in about 110,000 new Americans, and now we're well over 800,000. And that's before you add in new people who are becoming citizens by birthright citizenship. This is a new thing that barely existed in the 1960s or 1970s, but in which you may have mothers fly over here from China, have the baby in San Diego, and fly back, and that's another citizen as well. So we're kind of changing America more quickly, in my opinion, than any other time in our history. In summary, when we view the border crisis, we are one more time at an all-time record for a March. We are not being callous or cruel because we are at all-time records in the number of people who are coming here legally as well. We are allowing over 100,000 Americans to die every year because of drug poisoning, and at least there's anecdotal evidence that the countries or the people bringing the fentanyl here want Americans to die. They have declared war on America, and their attitude is the more Americans die, the better. And there is also evidence that foreign countries are letting people out of their jails and into the United States, taking advantage of our weak and uncaring president, who apparently does not consider it a priority that over 100,000 people die, and apparently doesn't see a problem with having other countries emptying their jails into the United States. The border is the number one problem facing this country right now, and this body has no business taking up any other issues until the border is dealt with. Now, one of my colleagues from Texas decided to address the situation in Israel. And I think there's a lack of a narrative being talked about there as well that ought to be addressed at this time. The people such as my colleague like to tear down Israel, say they've done something wrong, say they must stop fighting, and kind of imply all the way around it's not that nice and good country. As a matter of fact, Israel, probably, if there's one country it's more like than any other, it's the United States of America. One way you can see it's like the United States of America is that people from all over the country want to come there. Indeed, I was recently at a mosque in my district, and they, with pride, pointed out that their sect of Islam had recently built a mosque in Israel, of all the places in the world that you would want to go. There are many people who, with a whole world to go to, are trying to get into Israel. When you read about the attacks last October, you may remember that some of the people who died were from Thailand, and some of the hostages taken were from Thailand. You might wonder, I didn't know there were so many Jewish people from Thailand. Actually, the reason people are coming there from Thailand is because there's so much opportunity there and so much freedom there that if you wanted to get a job anywhere in the world, people from Thailand or other places in Asia have decided to come a significant way around the world to work in Israel. There were newspaper articles, we don't know what's become of it, but tens of thousands of people in Ecuador apparently are thinking about coming halfway around the world and work in Israel. Why don't we ever hear about that? There was a time a while back in which Israel began to embark on a perhaps two-state solution, something they regretted. But in any event, at the time they did it, maps were drawn up so that people could move from one part or the other Presumably Arabs would want to move to areas controlled by Arabs, and Jews would want to move to areas controlled by Israel. And to their surprise, the Arabs who were living in Israel proper did not want to move. They would have rather lived in the new country, or the new lines. They would have rather lived in Jewish Israel than in a new Arab state. Isn't that interesting? And nevertheless, all we get criticism from Israel. But when push came to shove, and you see where people want to live, people everywhere, be it in Asia, be it in South America, or be it in and around Israel, want to live in Israel, and want to live in Israel more than a new country. You look at and say, why aren't things better in Gaza? Is Israel did something wrong? In fact, Gaza has been a corrupt country. Foreign aid which flows into Gaza, particularly from Europe, winds up going to the leaders of Hamas, who may be living in Qatar and may be living in Turkey and may be living in France. Indeed, many of you remember the name Yasser Arafat, who for many years was the voice of the Arabs in Israel. And when he died, with all the money that he got, I don't know why he got it all, obviously taking money, foreign aid from around the world, his ancestors got out of Gaza. They weren't going to spend money there. They got out of Israel. They are living in Paris, France right now, another Western country, rather than living in the Arab parts of Israel. So therefore, when people say Israel must call for a ceasefire or stop fighting, in fact, Israel is a very desirable country. They have every right to protect their country from horrible people who try to cut off the kids of little children. And if anybody should surrender, it is Hamas who should surrender. And they at any time, I'm sure, could come out of their tunnels, say, we surrender. We're going to escort the Israeli army through these tunnels so we see exactly what was here. And the war would end, any killing would end. But instead, people tell Israel they should stop fighting. And I think I know the reason for that. If you look at a parent, and they have a 10-year-old child and a 4-year-old child fighting in the backseat of the car, which child does the parents address? They address the 10-year-old child because that's the older child and the more likely one to understand what's right or wrong. And I kind of think when I see these protesters outside of this building every day when we walk by them that purport to care about the people of Gaza, they ask us to tell the Israelis to stop fighting. They don't have demonstrations to tell Hamas to stop fighting. And I think that's because they know deep down inside they want to treat kind of Hamas like children and don't expect them to wake up and realize that their behavior is causing some civilians, innocent civilians, to be killed. But in any event, to summarize, everybody should remember, people from all around the world are trying to come to Israel. Not just Jewish people, people from Ecuador, people from Thailand. There are mosques of people from Islam who are apparently happy to live in Israel. You do not see Jewish temples in Gaza because that is not a country that naturally wants peace or is willing to live with people other than, or largely, other Arabs. In any event, I will call for Hamas to stop their fighting, and if they care about their people, just step out of your tunnels, say, here, Israel army, we are, and that will be the end of a war in which, sadly, too many civilians have died. Now, the third critical issue that we should be addressing right now and have not talked about enough is what I will call the war on the American family. I think it's probably the biggest issue facing America today. The war on the American family started in earnest with the Great Society programs in the 1960s. The Great Society programs were programs in which material things were given to families, usually, not always, but usually families without a man in the house. And sadly, there are ideologies which want to get rid of families in which you have a man in the house, families which are self-supporting. The type of programs which are not always, but usually available to households without a husband or a father around are many. The big ones are the nutrition programs, very generous housing programs, health care programs, education programs such as Pell Grants, other cash programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit. All of these programs require that you not work too hard or make too much money in order to get these programs. All of these programs have in common that if there's a man in the house making a relatively decent wage, that family is not considered in poverty and they will not be eligible for their free low-income housing or free food or earned income tax credit, which can result in a check of $10,000 or $15,000. You're not eligible for special cash benefits that go to parents with disabled children. So all the way across the board, we seem to be encouraging the breakdown of the family. Now you may say, oh, Glenn, family is like mom and apple pie. Everybody wants families, but that's not true. If you look at Karl Marx and his ilk, they believe the key to destroying the West, including the United States, was getting rid of the American family. More recently around here, we had the Black Lives Matter group, and I realize not everybody who had a sign in their yard agreed with this, but the founders of the group did. They wanted to get rid of what they referred to as the Western prescribed nuclear family. In other words, they viewed a family with a husband at home with being a problem. I recently ran across a quote in a book that somebody gave me, and I just opened the book and I came to a few lines which I think everybody in Congress ought to be aware of. The lines were from a woman by the name of Kate Millay, who, if you're my age, you frequently remember. She was a very prominent feminist in the 60s, the decade which really began to result in the decline of America. And her sister quoted her as saying that a goal of feminism should be destroying the American family. So one more time we run across not a huge number of people, but disproportionately influential people saying that a goal should be to weaken the family. And then you look at one more time President Trump proposing increases in programs, be it low-income housing programs, be it the Earned Income Tax Credit programs, be it the Pell Grant programs, all of which are really made for families without a husband earning a decent salary at home. All these programs are being increased by President Biden. In fact, what we ought to be doing is we ought to be doing the opposite. Right now, it's not surprising if a man is not in the house, because in some cases, his family would be materially better off without him being in the house. In particular, some of the low-income housing projects, particularly Section 42 projects, are new buildings which are superior to the buildings or superior to the rental units that American families are sometimes living in. Of course, the health care programs designed for the poorer people don't have sizable deductibles in them. And in that regard, they are in many ways superior to the health care plans that the working poor get. There are programs, like I said, for college scholarships. And I will recite again a quote from a a gal I ran across when I talked about these marriage penalties in Wisconsin. I recited all the benefits that people were able to get if they didn't marry a man with a decent income, and I asked her, "What do you think about my speech?" She told me, "Well, I'm married and I have a child, but none of my friends are getting married. They get free college." So here was another program, the Pell Grant program, designed to encourage the breakdown of the American family. It is important that when we go into the budget negotiations and the appropriation negotiations for the year beginning October 1st, that our appropriators and our leaders go to bat and say, no more benefits, special benefits, for making sure there's a man not in the house. As a matter of fact, we should go backwards because, not surprising, after Lyndon Johnson, in my opinion, the worst president of the United States until Joe Biden came along, it's not surprising that Lyndon Johnson, what used to be called, we'll call it the out of wedlock rate, has skyrocketed since the 1960s. And with it, a variety of problems that come with not having a father in the household. So it's time to look at these programs again, and rather than pay people to keep the husband out of the house, encourage people to have the father at home. And this is not just a material matter. It is a matter of it's better for the children to have a father at home, and it's better for the father himself to be at home. As George Gilder points out, who's an author that I think we all ought to be reading, the number one person hurt by the war on the American family, be it Karl Marx's war or Lyndon Johnson's war, whatever you want to say, the number one problem is to the men who now don't have a function in life. And if you look at certain areas of our society, it's the men who are more likely to do the drugs or commit the crimes. If they were a father with responsibilities at home, I think these crimes would happen a lot less. I think there'll be less drinking. I think there'll be less drug abuse. And I think America would slowly work its way back to the more wholesome, less crime-ridden, less drug-ridden time of the 1960s. So I hope both parties pay attention to the impact or incentives or disincentives that their programs have on having men in the household. In any event, there are three issues that we've dealt with today. Again, we have dealt with the border, where we hit record numbers, and the fact that it has become apparent that we're not getting the best of the people, and apparently other countries are emptying out their prisons. We've dealt with what's going on in Israel and what a wonderful country it is, as people from all around the world, including people who aren't Jewish, try to get into Israel, kind of like people from all around the world try to get in our country. But ignoring this, they're still subject to criticism by people like the protesters outside or my predecessor here in Congress, who just got done talking. And finally, I hope the press pays attention to, and the Republican Party pays attention to, the increase in benefits to families without a father at home that he wants to put in this budget, which I'm sure if was enacted would, again, push up the number of families in which, sadly, there's not a father at home to help raise the children. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back.
I yield back.
So they're going to have to wait 90 seconds to see if the Dem shows up.
Oh.
We'll adjourn.
This was what was.
Does the gentleman have a motion?
I'd like to move adjournment.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.